Hello all you fine people out there. Yes, I'm back with another video, and this time it's a video that I've been meaning to do for a very long time actually. And for those people who like vinyl, yes, it's a vinyl video, so you've got none of those horrible shiny round things lurking here. Now, a couple of months ago there was a thread going around which was talking about bands that don't get mentioned on the VC very often, and I thought of a band that didn't get mentioned very often, and I've meant to record this for ages, but what I wanted to do was revisit all the albums that I had first, so that I could get a really good grip. I mean, I know these records really well anyway, but it had been a long time since I listened to these properly, really. I relied on their greatest hits quite a lot, and, you know, the best known tracks and stuff. So, that band is, and I'm going to use, which one should I use? Oh, that's good, these are out of order. I'm going to use this one. It's Dave and Annie. It's the Eurythmics. So, one of the best-selling groups from the 80s. I'm just putting this back in order. Hang on a second. That one goes there. And then that one goes there. And that one goes there. There we go. And we're sorted. Right. So, they met in 76. Annie Lennox was a student at the Royal Academy of Music, and she played in a couple of bands, and Dave Stewart was a bit of a folky, and he played in some bands, and they met up with another mate of Dave Stewart's, and they formed a band called The Catch, who recorded a single. I've never heard that, I don't know what it's like. Then they slowly morphed into a band called The Tourists, and The Tourists, well, they were never a mega band, but they did have a couple of top 10 hits. And just to open, I've shown this before. I showed this when I got it in a haul from a record fair. This is Reality Effect. This was the best-selling Tourist album. They did have two others, but this has got both their top 10 hits on it, which were, well, UK top 10 hits anyway, which were So Good to Be Back Home Again and I Only Want to Be With You, which is, of course, a Dusty cover. And I'll revisit the theme of Annie and Dusty for one of the albums in particular, or maybe a period of their history. So anyway, Tourists fell apart in about 1979, 1980. It's a shame, because they were a good band, kind of mixing that kind of post-punky sound, but with real hefty wallop of the 60s. Now, not necessarily just Dusty, but it was like kind of just a lot of different sounds from the 60s, like poppy end of it. But anyway, so they managed to get a recording contract, or I think, they managed to get a recording contract with RCA. I don't know whether Logo, which was their label for The Tourists, were some way connected with RCA, but they did. And in 1981, they recorded their first album with Connie Plank, which was this one. This is actually their debut album. Now, this is In the Garden. This is such a different beast to any of their other albums. It's, I mean, if I say that members of Can played on it, I think Jackie Leibzeit and Leibzeit, I'm not good on pronunciation, and Holger Chukai played on this. You got Clem Burke on drums from Blondie. It is a very European sounding record. It's quite experimental. Now, lots of jagged rhythms, lots of jagged. Not all of it's jagged though. Some of it is quite very, very pretty. And I think the biggest thing about this record is Annie's vocals. They are so almost dreamy. dreamlike, kind of removed from what she was best known for later on in the Eurythmics history. This is a fantastic record. It didn't sell anything. I think one of the singles, Belinda, was it Belinda? Or was it Never Gonna Cry Again? Oh, it might have been Never Gonna Cry Again. Got to about number 63 or something. But this is so worth investigating. Even if you don't like the Eurythmics much, which some of their records I can understand, you should really find this, because this is a great album. Nothing like their other stuff. It's all very guitar based, very new wavy, very not new wave, very post punky. Really quite experimental in places, as you'd expect from the people who actually played on this. Never Gonna Cry Again is brilliant. Take Me to Your Heart. Sing Sing, which is sung in French. It's a really, really good album. There's wearing a mask and a tiger mask. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's something to do with their personalities. I have no idea. Okay, so that's their debut album as the Eurythmics. Then, all through 1982, they released a string of flop singles. I mean, I think three singles they released that were flops. And then in early 1983, after the release of a certain single, came this album. And that album is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. And of course it's the home of Sweet Dreams. Now, one of the mysteries to me is why they released three singles before they got it into their heads to release Sweet Dreams as a single. It's just a no-brainer for me. Sweet Dreams is just one of those unbelievably good songs. I just think it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And why they released some of the other things thinking they were more commercial, I have no idea. Sweet Dreams, I think, is turning into one of those kind of modern standards almost, because of the vast range of people that cover it. Kind of almost like Wicked Game by you know what I mean. Chris Isaak. Ha, gotcha. Right, got it. Chris Isaak, Wicked Games is becoming a modern standard just because of the amount of people who cover it. Now, this is a completely different album to what came before on In the Garden. Now, this was the first Eurythmics album I got. I didn't get this until maybe the Christmas afterwards. So I would have got this in 1984, I think. But it was, or maybe 1983. Maybe Christmas 83 I got this. So this is my original copy from, this is my original copy that I got. In fact, all the Eurythmics albums I have, I got at the time. So this is a brilliant album. It's the second of their run of truly brilliant albums, which kind of stopped mid-80s, really. So yeah, Sweet Dreams, obviously the track that got everybody interested in the Eurythmics, and also the video set them up as being one of the iconic video acts of the 80s. I mean, that Sweet Dreams video is just, I think, it's just so 1980s. It is just so 1980s. And along with Boy George, it was really all, that gender bending, as it was called then, playing about with gender roles and all that kind of stuff. She was she was in parallel with Boy George, so people changing their ideas at the start of a lot of things. But this album, it's a really good album. The singles off here, I mean, after the singles that were released, in 1982 they released The Walk and This Is the House, which are both great songs. The Walk, I think, is that the last track on side 2? Somebody told me this city never sleeps. Oh yeah. I'm just doing it. And I've got an angel loves a stranger. So yeah, the Walk and This Is the House. They're both good tracks. I mean, they're both really quite. They're on the right on the edge of progressive pop music at the time, using synths in new ways. I mean, they're a bit late to the synth party, really, because a lot had happened already. I mean, they were, Gary Newman had been around for 3 years by this point, and he was basically on the way out. But they were using them in different ways, and it was really interesting what they were doing with them. And then coupled with Annie's image, it was just fantastic. And they also released Love Is a Stranger, but that didn't hit either. Until it was re-released after Sweet Dreams and then became a British top 10 hit. This is, as I said, it is a really, really good record. They've got things. Green Gartside is on here in a duet with Wrap It Up. I think he's on Wrap It Up. Hang on. Yes, Wrap It Up, which is a cover of the Hayes Border song. You've got things like I Could Give You a Mirror. You've still got things that would almost fit on the debut, things like Jennifer. Now, if you've ever heard this album, this was a big album. There are lots of copies of this one around. If you've heard Jennifer of this album, then that will give you a brilliant idea of what In the Garden is like. And I think Jennifer is one of those. It is probably one of my favourite songs on the album. Introducing lots of Annie lyrics which have water in the theme of it. So that's Sweet Dreams. So that came out in January 83. And they didn't hang about then, because in November 83, I think it was November, yeah, it was November, came what I think is probably their best album, and it's this one, which is Touch. And a lot's been said about the cover image, where this is Annie really not wanting to be touched, and the whole album is, it's very, very cool, very standoffish, it's not a very warm album. It's very brooding, I think, apart from a certain track. So you've got Here Comes the Rain Again was a single off it. You've got Right By Your Side, which doesn't fit at all, actually. The rest of the album is very deep and brooding, and then you've got this up-tempo sort of almost party conga song, which, to be honest, who the guys who did Agadoo? I mean, if they'd recorded it, it wouldn't have been that far off, to be honest. It was a sign of what was to come with Eurythmics that I wasn't in love with. But you got things like Regrets, Cool Blue, Who's That Girl on side A, which are all very, seem to be sort of not anti, but almost the downside relationships, the heartbreak side of it. And then, now I'd forgotten how good this side 2 of this album was. Side 2 is incredible, absolutely incredible. It starts off with the first cut, which is a synth song, but it's very jagged, very very cold, and then it goes into Aqua, which is one of the most brooding sounding songs I've ever heard in my life. Again, the water thing comes in, that's the sea, water, coolness. Then you get No Fear, No Hate, No Pain, No Broken Hearts. Now, Annie's vocals on that are just incredible. Now, soon she'd get accused of basically having this almost foghorn voice without much passion, and I'd want almost passionless. It's more like a kind. Her voice is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but she's not a soul singer. I would argue that Annie Lennox was a brilliant pop singer, but a pretty poor soul singer. It's not her to me. She doesn't fit that mold. Um, and on here, she's getting all that. She's getting a few of those vocal tics, those yelps and has and all that kind of stuff in it. She hasn't gone into that Mariah Carey-esque melisma. Is that what it's called? Melisma. Is that what it's called? Anyway, you know, the warbling, which she'd also do later. And then it goes into Paint a Rumour. Now the whole side just works so well for me because it's kind of it brings in bits of world music. There's kind of Middle Eastern textures to things. There's African textures to it. It's like somebody had been listening to what is it? My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. That's what it's called, isn't it? And taken some lessons for that. It's not as groundbreaking as that album, but for a pop album that made #1, to have this kind of music on it is true. Well, I think it's quite remarkable, to be honest. And when I listened to this again, I remember loving it as a kid, but I don't think as a kid I really understood it quite as well. But I was absolutely blown away by it when I recently listened to it again. So now this you can find all over the place in charity shops, and you can get this dead cheap. Get this just to listen to side 2. Right, they seem to be on a creative roll here, because not only did they release that in November '83, then in November '84 they actually scored the 1984 movie, which was released in 1984, which is just about. This was released on Virgin. They had a massive single with Sex Crime, which I think to a kid, 14, 15 or wherever it was, with basically the song just repeats sex over and over again. Well, you can't go wrong, really. But it's a brilliant song. I just loved it. Now, this is kind of much more experimental. I would say it's almost a mix of what they were doing on Sweet Dreams and Eurythmics and some of what they were doing on Sweet Dreams and Touch. So there's a lot of that kind of world music textures on here. But there's also some of the dreamy stuff as well, which comes from In the Garden. So it's a real melange of what's been gone before, but churned up in a new way. Now, there was a lot of controversy. Well, there was some controversy about this because apparently the director of 1984 said that the Eurythmics music for the film was foisted on him, and the composer of the music, the orchestral music, or the other music used for 1984 had a bit of a spat with them, and basically they just said, well, we had nothing to do with it, we were just contacted to make some music, so they made this. I'm not sure how much music was used. I know the DVD was released in two versions, one with the Eurythmics music and one with the other guy's music, and I'm not sure which one I've seen because it's been such a long time since I saw it. But I do love this soundtrack. Really good stuff, and I think I don't know whether it would soundtrack the film that well, but as an album it hangs together. But maybe this is I think it's For the Love of Big Brother is what the album's actually called, and I think they had to put out a statement that said it was music more inspired. It's one of those inspired by 1984 rather than an actual soundtrack. So I reckon the music that was probably used in the one version of the film was not these full tracks, but sort of excerpts of them or bits of them, which they then worked up into full tracks. Yeah, it's not as good. I mean, obviously, it's not as good as Touch or Sweet Dreams or In the Garden, but it's still worth a good listen. I really, really like this soundtrack. Um, I'm not sure about that picture. That looks more like oh, it's kind of in between, going going between eras really. Dressed up in, I guess that's from the 1984 video. Another single off here was Julia, which I think is quite lovely, but I can understand why it wasn't a hit. Right. Then in 1985 they came back with the next album. Now there was a sea change here, an absolute sea change. I don't know whether people were telling Annie that she could be the new Dusty, or whether they just had enough of electronic music and are just trying something new. I'm not sure. But they came up with this one. Right, this is Be Yourself Tonight. Now I remember really well the first single of this, Would I Lie For You? And I loved it. I still love it. It was completely different from what had gone before. Completely different. Whereas before it was all very cool, very synth, very cold, not cold, but cool, aloof, not taking part in feelings. Then you've got this, Would I Lie For You, which is basically a soul, a guitar soul rompathon. There's the lyric sheet. I don't think it, oh yeah, it's got a picture cover. It has got a picture cover on the inside. There we go. For me, they took a wrong turn. They started to take a wrong turn with this. Now, I do like this album. I like this album. It's not a great album. It's definitely the worst of them so far. But Would I Lie To You was brilliant. But on here, they definitely left behind the synth pop for which they'd become famous. And it's much more soul based. I mean, they've got all kinds of guest stars on here. I mean, obviously Aretha doing Sisters, which, and Stevie Wonder doing the harmonica on There Must Be an Angel, which I remember at the time when Angel got to number one, I was flabbergasted. They'd never had a number one before, and then this got to number one, and I hated it. Now I've mellowed towards There Must Be an Angel. I can tolerate it now. The one that I've really done a bold-face on was Sisters Doing It For Themselves. Any time there's anything to do with feminism or women or Sisters Are Doing It For Themselves gets churned out, and I am heartily sick to death of the song. I wish I could not hear that song for a long time so I can reevaluate it properly. But it needs not to be played for a while. I think Elvis Costello's on it. Oh yeah, Adrian. What was Costello doing in the middle '80s sometimes? Because that's a stinker of a song. So as you can tell, I wasn't that impressed with this album, and it's kind of grown less on me over the years. I Love You Like a Ball and Chain's okay. Conditioned Soul's not bad. But it's kind of, yeah, it sold a shed load in America and they sold loads of records, but for me they'd lost it at this point. It just wasn't what I'd grown to love the Eurythmics. I mean, Would I Lie To You I'd loved, but it wasn't the Eurythmics. I would have loved that if it had been by just about anybody because it's such a good song. But they kind of started losing it for me by this album. And then also, this is where you get Annie as starting to do an impression of a soul singer. And for me, it just never really worked. She's a fantastic pop stylist, but that's where she should have stayed, not trying to be this real singer, because she just can't carry the soul. She's not a soulful singer. Not everybody can sing like Aretha. It's, not everybody can. Not everybody can sing like Dusty. Stick to your strengths. And their move towards the mainstream was compounded by this one, which is Revenge. I this isn't as bad as I remembered it, but I thought it's a bit of a clunker, to be honest. I mean, there's some good tracks. Thorn in My Side, I could really hope I never hear again because I'm sick to death of it. It is. There's about 3 Eurythmics songs like that, 3 or 4. There's what's on Touch? It's Right By Your Side is one. Angel, possibly. Sisters, definitely. And Thorn in My Side. I wish I could not hear it for a while. Miracle of Love is an awful track. But then you've got other things like Missionary Man. Missionary Man is a seed that I think they ran with on their next album, because that is a terrific track. But it's just, it is pandering to the mainstream, going after the dollar for me. And I think they've run out of ideas by this point, because it's kind of it's just a lackluster record. Yeah, the cover, well, I don't even know about the cover art, to be honest. I don't rate this at all. And this is from one of the bands who I absolutely loved in the 80s. Absolutely loved them. From the early 80s are just one of my favourites. Missionary Man, I would say, is the absolute standout track, but most of the rest of that, it's my least favourite of the Eurythmics albums I have. So there we go. This is a long video. Hope you're keeping your eyelids open. But there was one last hurrah for me in the Eurythmics. Now, as I said, Missionary Man was the absolute standout track from the album. And they seem to have taken that and went with this. Now, this was not a big success. A lot of people called this a step away from success. I think it's a return. It's not a complete return to their more experimental pop stuff, but it's definitely getting there. Or it was definitely getting there. I think the first single was I love to listen to Beethoven, and that is an amazing track. It's all about this. It seems to be a very loose concept album of a woman, Midwest American woman, sort of housewife, just basically losing her marbles and just wanting to get out of that boring humdrum life. And imagining all these things that she could do. And it does bear that out, because Beethoven is her listening. It's her where the story starts, when she's in her home, and she gets her escape by listening to Beethoven. And the lyrics deal with imagining a life that is completely different. And then you've got, I see it as more imaginary stuff. So I've got a lover back in Japan, imagining all those lovers around the world. And then you get to, do you want to break up? And she's imagining she wants to out. One of their best songs is You Have Placed a Chill in My Heart. Now, they never released a fully acoustic version of that. I wish somebody would, because it is a fantastic song. Absolutely gorgeous song. Then you've got Shame, which celebrates the shallowness and facileness of celebrity lifestyle. And Savage, which is all about, it kind of develops that theme even more. I mean, the lyrics are highly sexually charged for me. I mean, you've got things like, did I tell you I was lying, by the way, when you said I wanted a new mink coat? I was thinking about something sleek to wrap around my tender throat. And things like, where was that other one? I need someone to crack my skull. I need someone to kiss. So hold me now, make pretend. Oh no, that's not the one. I need you to really feel the twist of my back breaking. I need someone to listen to the ecstasy I'm faking. So it's all about that. And then you've got one of their best songs, and it's not a synth song actually. It's one of the only non-synthy songs on here, which is I Need a Man, which is an out-and-out rocking. It's the Stones basically with a female singer. And then you've got things like Wide-Eyed Girl, I Need You, and it's got the lovely Brand New Day just to round things off. And it actually came, and I'm just going to finish off. And well, not finish off, I'll do that in a minute. So this for me was the last hurrah for the Eurythmics. Now they did, I love this album, I think this is a brilliant album, and you can pick this up fairly cheap as well. In fact, most of their albums you can pick up. I would recommend everything except Revenge. And even then, well, you know, if you like that mainstream pop, that kind of real middle ground rock, poppy, rocky sort of sound. I mean, it's not a terrible album, to be honest. It's just that the Eurythmics were much more than that at one point, and I think they could have been so much more than that. But anyway, but this was their last hurrah for me, because when they released one more album in the 80s, and I don't have it because I'd just lost interest by then. I might buy it now. I've heard some of the songs on the greatest hits, and they're all right, but they're nothing spectacular. We Two Are One. I've heard the singles, and I wasn't interested. My musical taste had changed by that point in the 80s. So this is where me and the Eurythmics parted company. But what a goodbye this was. And then I haven't listened to the reunion album piece. I'm not interested at all. I do have some of Annie's solo stuff. I'd recommend some of that. It's all right. Not brilliant. It's all right. But just the last thing I'm going to show is this poster of Annie as the housewife. And you can see the mask is slipping. I think that's a great poster for myself. I love that picture of Annie. So there we go. An appreciation or a personal history of the Eurythmics. Kind of bit history, bit fact, bit whatever. The Eurythmics. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to do some CD videos next, just to warn you. But they're going to be, I'm going to be looking at bands that I bought stuff in the 90s. Now the 90s is, especially from 93 onwards, I didn't buy any vinyl. I didn't buy any, I think probably 10, 15 years until I bought another record. Bought a couple sort of during the middle 2000s, but they were second-hand things. So I'm going to be looking at bands. I'm going to try and thematically group bands together. So I hope you'll enjoy the next one, because I've enjoyed listening to them, and I'll put that up in a couple of days. But there we go, the Eurythmics. Share your thoughts on what they meant to you. Did they mean anything to you? Were they a load of rubbish? Were they brilliant? The best things since sliced bread? I don't know. Well, I do know. They were brilliant at one point, and then they weren't brilliant. And then they released one brilliant album, and then they didn't. So there we go. Right. Cheers, VC. I'll see you all later. Bye.